So we are really lucky to have with us today Rachel Kristy, who many of you may know as Rachel Kelsey, wonderful class of 1989. Um,
Yep.
we have a lot to talk about. You wrote a wonderful piece that I want to post, but not until we've got the website cleaned up professionally, which will is maybe 2 or 3 weeks away. But I do want to ask you, you're doing, I want to ask you first about the work you're doing now with editing and other associated skills, and then how that may or may not tie into what you learned at Crossroads.
All right. Sounds good.
Okay.
So where do you want to start?
Well, if you can describe what you're doing now.
All right. So at the moment, I am a freelance technical editor, and I work mostly on financial due diligence documents for private investment vehicles, which I'm probably the only person who actually reads them cover to cover because I have to because they pay me. But they're dreadfully
Okay.
boring, but it pays well. So it's good. I put my kids through college.
Okay. Okay. And so what kind of clients do you have?
Mostly I have one boutique due diligence shop that I do all of their editing for. And then I have other clients that are more fun. I don't just have to read financial dreck all the time. I do some editing for academic clients. So I do books and journal article kind of things for mostly international clients. So folks who are not native English speakers, who are writing in English for journals and for books that are being published in English. So they're great writers and they're very smart people, but their English isn't always on point. So I can go in and give them some pointers on what phrasing to use when they sometimes have something that maybe looks like it went through Google Translate because they weren't quite sure what to do with it. And that's actually the most fun thing that I do. So
Interesting. Okay. So am I correct on a good day, you're maybe 20, 25 minutes from downtown DC?
oh, on a good day, yes. It's
Right.
about 35 minutes to downtown from where we are. On a
Okay.
bad day, it's 2+ hours. So you never know. In the summer, we don't go to DC on the weekends.
Well, I was going to get there, but the reason I ask right now is uh, do you get a lot of clients by virtue of being near DC?
I don't, honestly. Most of my clients have come from college friends. Um,
Really?
yeah, the financial side stuff came through a classmate of mine who I worked with uh, in a completely other context when we were in school, and she started editing long ago, like 20 years ago now, after realizing that she did not like making a living as a geologist. And so she figured out something else to do, and she had too much work, and she called me up one day and said, "Hey, do you want to do some of this? Because I know you're good at it." And I said, "Sure, why not?" Because I was home with a little kid at the time and had no other outlets for doing something besides playing with small children, and it sounded pretty good. So been at it
Well,
for a while.
yeah, well that's most interesting to me because you said she was a geologist and you have a background in science as well, right?
Yeah, so I have a bachelor's and a master's degree in geology. Went to Macalester College after I graduated from Crossroads, along with Leila Bartko and Sharif Maybed. We were all three there at the same time. And then I went on after graduating. I ended up at Kansas State and did a master's in geology there. And then worked for about 5 years after that for Union Pacific Resources, which is an oil and gas company in Dallas, Fort Worth. It was in Dallas, Fort Worth at the time. It was the company that was formed by the Union Pacific Railroad, because when they built the Transcontinental Railroad, the deal they made with the government was that they got every other section. So every other
Square mile?
yeah, every other square mile, 10 miles on either side of the railroad line,
Ooh,
as a land grant from the US government in
okay.
exchange for building this lovely railroad, which they kept. And because they were smart, they got not just the land rights, but also the mineral rights. And so they have mineral rights across Wyoming, throughout the Lewiston Basin up there, and have tons of oil and gas. They're also one of the major producers of trona, which is what you make baking soda out of. So I worked for them for 5 years, first as a regulatory analyst and then as a development geologist. And then the company got bought by another company that wanted to move to Houston. And my husband had a job in Dallas, and they gave us the option of move to Houston and keep your job or have a big check. So I took the big check and left.
Very nice. So how did you wind up from Dallas to Virginia?
That's sort of a long and sordid tale as well. So I got the job in Texas first, and then my husband got a job as he's a museum curator. So he was the curator of the Kavanaugh
Really?
Flight Museum in Dallas. And then after that at the American Airlines Museum. And then after I got laid off, we stayed in Dallas for a while, had a baby. And then he got a job at the Evergreen Aviation Museum in McMinnville, Oregon. So we moved to Oregon. And we were there for about 3 years. And then he got the opportunity to come to Virginia to be the aviation curator for the National Museum of the Marine Corps. So we moved to Quantico, Virginia.
This is really interesting. Well, wait, how far are you from Quantico now?
About 10 minutes.
Okay, so I don't think you knew Jim Abbott, who was in the first Crossroads graduating class,
I
1980.
don't.
Well, Jim is a curator. He was also at the Evergreen Museum, a different
Really?
one, the Art Museum on the campus of Johns Hopkins in
Oh,
Baltimore. He was there for a number of years. Um,
interesting.
yeah, yeah. He's now at a museum in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which is where Carol was living until she passed away about a year and a half ago. But
Yeah.
yeah, but
Huh. What a
it's
small world.
interesting. I mean, that I think there may be some cause and effect beyond coincidence in the type of work that people who went to Crossroads or are close to people who went to Crossroads. It's an interesting connection you have, a museum curator and,
Yeah.
and scientist. Is it kind of like opposites attract or what?
It was honestly, I think I can chalk a lot of this up to my Crossroads experience because
Okay.
Crossroads was a good place for me because I was a science and history person. And most people, it's like math and science or history and literature
Right.
kind of things. But Crossroads made it really easy for me to like cross over and do a weird combo. And so when I went to Macalester, I took a lot of history classes and I met my husband in a history class.
Interesting. You said something in what you had written about Tanda and how she had really helped you get interested in sciences. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah, she was the first, my first real exposure to like real science, not just like elementary school science. And being able to like see her experience both as a teacher and I think she had some industry experience as well that she brought in. And she just made chemistry interesting and fun. And it made sense to me, which was I thought was really cool. And then I got to college and realized it didn't make sense to me. So I ended up in geology instead. Chemistry was great until I got to the part where you were doing X-ray diffraction. And then I was like, wait a minute. No.
Well, okay, so the geology background. I mean, I would think that it ties right in with history, doesn't it? In the
It
sense that
does.
you're not looking at things that happened 5 minutes ago.
No, no.
Yeah.
And you have to have the long view.
Um, So, are there any particular mysteries that stand out to you that you've worked on dealing with?
Uh, the my graduate work was on climate change back
Okay.
in the Pleistocene era, so the last ice age. I worked on a core sample from the Lake Bonneville region in Utah, and looking at how the climate changed throughout all of the sediments that accumulated in Lake Bonneville over thousands of years, and seeing those rhythms of climate change and being able to compare that to the folks who went on with the work that I worked on have since compared it to the modern era and have shown that no, this isn't normal because we know what normal looked like from this work.
Yeah.
And what we have now is definitely different. So,
Interesting. Now, something else that you had written about was um, how in so many ways Crossroads was really, really good for you because it was a small school, which at the time was something that was really, what you needed then. And then you wrote about your son going to a big public school and how, you saw all kinds of advantages to that. So if you can say a little bit
Yeah.
more about that now, that'd be great.
Yeah, when I got to Macalester and its 1,250 students felt enormous to me. It felt
Hmm.
so big. And that was half the size of my son's high school. So I mean, I knew everybody at Crossroads up and down the grades. I mean, as
Yeah.
a seventh grader, I knew seniors. Everybody knew everybody else. Everybody was in everybody else's business to a certain extent. But it was nice to have that like family feel where you knew everybody knew what was going on with you, and if something was up, somebody was going to say something or do something about it, and that was wonderful for me. I really needed that as a kid. My son went to a big public high school. He had, gosh, I think almost 700 kids in his graduating class.
Wow.
But he took full advantage of, when you've got a big school that big, you don't just have one English class for everybody and one math class for everybody. So he
Right.
was able to take advantage of some of that stuff. He went to a magnet program that was really cool and got to do 2 years of college classes at George Mason before he graduated from high school. So
Interesting.
that was very cool. And it gave him a really good head start for when he went to college. He went to University of Virginia and he came out as an aerospace engineer. So he took after my dad.
That's really interesting. Well, several things from that. One of the first interviews I did with this project was with Jim Igo.
Yeah.
Yeah, pre-high school, and he's head of the anthropology department at UVA.
Yeah, I found that very interesting. We probably saw him graduation weekend because everybody was out in all of their academic finery all weekend, and he was probably one of them, I'm assuming.
Yeah, yeah,
But
most interesting. So, your son is a rocket scientist, is that
he
correct?
is, my husband is very fond of saying that we won parenting because we managed to raise a rocket scientist. So, yeah, he works at the Applied Physics Lab at Johns Hopkins and is working on hypersonic reentry vehicles. So, I don't
Wow,
I don't understand 90% of what he does, and he can't tell me anyway because it's all top secret.
it's
So,
all classified, huh? Well, but if I understand correctly, theoretically, that's something that Russia and China are ahead of the U.S. on. Is that correct?
yeah, yeah. And he came out of school with a really good background in that because one of his professors was a hypersonics person. So when he was started looking for jobs, he had a very easy time of it because he's very well situated for today's environment. So
So is he in Baltimore or?
he right now he lives in Hyattsville, just outside of the DC area.
Yeah, right.
And he and his girlfriend are moving to just outside of Baltimore this summer. They decided the commute was too long from where they are.
Fantastic. That's terrific. Um, you were one of the people at Crossroads who was actually a neighborhood kid. Um,
Yes,
yeah.
I
Uh,
walk to school every day.
yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about that, what that was like?
Yeah, so when I started, we lived in the Skinker-DeBaliviere neighborhood my whole life. I was actually, when I was born, we had a house on Pershing Place in the West End, and
Hmm.
then moved to Skinker-DeBaliviere right between Skinker and De Pere, and had, went to Forsyth School and walked to school every day there, just about until my younger sister finally started kindergarten and I got a ride to school that year for sixth grade. So that was big excitement.
Interesting. Okay.
And
You-
then after that came to Crossroads for seventh grade and I walked through the neighborhood together every day. And then in high school, my folks moved to Kingsbury Square. So it was even closer and I didn't have to get up as early.
so yeah, your folks moved to what had been not renovated but redeveloped, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, we were one of the original owners in Kingsbury Square when that was developed. So
That
it was it was great. I could roll out of bed and be at school in 15 minutes.
Yeah, yeah, and you were kind of in the shadow of the Bi-State barn. You remember that?
Yes. Yeah, our house backed right up to it. It wasn't there when we bought the house. They built it after we bought the house.
Is that
So
right? Okay.
yeah, so we went from having nothing in our back, or like vacant lot and horribleness in our backyard, to a buffer to all the noise of Del Mar, which was really nice.
You may also be interested in knowing, and maybe you know it, that the tower, radio tower by the school, is no longer there,
I
but
noticed
it's been
that.
replaced by,
Yes.
they felt that they could not properly repair it. And so there's another one there for another 75 years or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. I wonder if Crossroads students still threaten to try and climb it.
Hope not. I hope not. But I have told the current heads of the school about what happened. They're really good folks. I feel great
That's good.
about that. You were part of a really special class. Very- and let me ask you this. So much at Crossroads, that we tried to create was a collaborative environment, people, working together, not
Yeah.
so competitive. But in your class, there were so many highly skilled, highly charged individuals.
Oh boy. Yeah. Our
Yeah,
class
can
was
you say a little
fun.
bit about that?
I still remember you guys having to bring in counselors to try and get us to work together on stuff because we were at each other's throats all the time. And I I yeah, I'm glad you did. I don't know that it worked, but we all went to college, so it was okay.
Yeah, yeah, you did, you
We
did.
all eventually left.
Right, right. But so you and Leela from your class went to Macalester, and I haven't talked to Leela. As you know, I interviewed Eva. Uh,
Yeah,
but was that helpful to have a former classmate?
not at all. It was actually really funny because we got there and she and I were on opposite sides of the tiny campus, but still opposite sides for where we were living first year,
Yeah.
and we didn't really interact much. We did both start out as chem majors and then both end up as geology majors, which I
Oh,
thought was
really? Okay.
funny. Yeah. Honestly, the person that was most helpful was Sharif because he had been at Mac for a year already. And so I ran into him like the first week of school and was like, hey. And he told me like where the good pizza place was just off campus.
Good for
So that was
him.
kind of nice. But
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so discounting for the moment, the job connections and so forth. Do you like living in Northern Virginia?
I do. We ended up here obviously because of my husband's job at the time, but he grew up here. So he's a Arlington native. His dad
Hmm.
went to work for the Department of Education in 1972, 73.
It
Well,
was,
it was later than
yeah,
that.
it had just
When
been
they founded
created.
the Department of Ed, he went to
Yeah.
work for them basically straight out of law school. Ben's brother was born here. Ben was born in Boston, in Milwaukee, while his dad was in Vietnam. But
Oh, wow.
he grew up here. His folks are still here, so it was great for us moving here. Our son was 5 when we moved, and so suddenly we had grandparents up the road, which was great.
Okay.
The first 5 years we never could get grandparents to, like, you couldn't leave him with grandparents and go do something, so
Right.
we didn't get to do that, and it was a really nice change. Like, for a long time every Wednesday my father-in-law came down and met the school bus when Sam got off the bus for kindergarten and would have lunch with him because it was half day kindergarten back then, and
Oh,
then
that's
go
great.
home because he was retired, so it was great. And yeah, and the opportunities here have been great as far as raising kids because, like St. Louis, all the museums are free. And that's not something that happens everywhere. I
Right.
was spoiled as a kid. I thought everywhere had a free zoo and a free art museum, but that's not the case most places. So,
I'm going to ask you a long shot. Okay.
all right.
Your son, Sam, do you remember his reaction the first time he saw the elevator in Roslyn going down to the metro?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. He really wanted to slide.
But they've got those little
They
notches there,
have
so
the
you
bumps.
can't.
They do. Honestly, the one that's even better is the one up by the zoo.
Oh, is that right?
I don't remember which station it is, but that one's even deeper. So it was a long, long elevator ride or escalator ride, and he always wanted to slide down them. Now he'd want to ride a mountain bike down them. So things haven't changed much.
I had the pleasure of living in Arlington for a couple of years when I was at American. We had a nice 2-bedroom apartment, 3 of us, 140 a month. Does that seem right? I do remember that.
Yeah,
But believe me, it's long since gone. But
I would. Yeah.
right, right. How about where are you in relation to Mount Vernon?
We're just a little bit south of there. We go past it. If we go up, my in-laws live in Alexandria now. So when we go up, we a lot of times, if we're avoiding the traffic on 95, we'll go up GW Parkway and go right past it. So
I think in common knowledge now, we know so much more about George Washington than we did, when you were in school. And Ron
yeah,
Chernow, who wrote Hamilton, wrote a biography of Washington that I found fascinating.
yeah,
Yeah. And, in particular, I remember, right when, the word was coming out about all of the documents that Trump had stowed away in Mar-a-Lago.
yeah,
Well, George Washington, at the end of his second term, maybe you knew this, did the same thing.
yeah. He did. So did Jefferson. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
He did a few other things too.
yeah, you know.
Right. Right. So are there any things you would like to know about Crossroads now? And I probably can't answer, but we can hopefully get people who can.
Yeah, no, I don't know anything about the school anymore because it seems like it's very different from when I went there. It seems like a whole lot has changed. The building looks different. It's got a whole nother wing.
It does.
My mom still lives down the street practically, so
Is that right?
yeah, my mom lives on Delmar, so
Oh, really? Okay.
yeah. Yeah, she finally decided that home ownership was not for her and is in an apartment on Delmar and loves life. So
Well,
I
that's
get up there
terrific.
at least, I
Yeah.
try and get up there at least once a year or so. So
Well, the new wing of the school is really, really nice.
yeah,
Um, and I know some of the students, I know some of the teachers and the heads, and I really like them. In my mind, and others may not agree, but I think there were some tough times. And quite frankly, there were tough times when we were there too. I mean, I think that um, I look back on it and I wish that as a faculty we had not had the tension among us that we had. And I don't know how apparent that was to you or to others, but
it, as a student, it really wasn't. But
yeah,
as an adult now looking back, I definitely can see where that would
right,
happen.
right. Any chance that you might come in for the reunion?
I've already bought plane tickets.
All
So
right,
I told my
awesome.
mom it was happening and she was like, "You need to come."
Oh,
So
that's terrific. Okay,
yeah.
and I'm nudging them to get a website up specifically for that, so that people can, you know, mark their names and others will
Yeah.
know they're going to be there. Yeah.
Yeah, no, last time I was in town, I got together and saw Virginia and Annie Price, which was
Oh,
great.
really?
Yeah, so that was they had just moved back to St. Louis from Chicago, and they're back in the neighborhood also. So
Well, they grew up in Parkview.
yeah, they're back in
Yeah.
their parents' house.
Is
So
that right?
yeah,
Okay.
yeah, they moved
See,
home to
there's
take care of mom and dad.
so many people I don't know about. I mean, um, if you could send to me, like, if you have their email addresses, that
Yeah,
would be great. I'd love to get them on the list.
all right, I can do that.
All right. And then one final question. And that is, in the 35 or so years since you were in high school, the country, the world, they've changed a whole lot.
Yeah.
Yeah. How have you and your family adapted to that? Do you think you're handling it pretty well?
Yeah, we try and ignore it as much as possible, which is against my Crossroads upbringing because I don't know how many years we all had a subscription to Newsweek. Was that the whole time? It seemed like.
Yeah, I mean, probably three or 4 years. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to ignore the news, but when certain political individuals start talking, I try to tune out these days because it just makes me crazy. So, yeah, being in DC makes it a lot more interesting too, because we're
I
sort of,
bet. I
the
bet.
epicenter of a lot. There've been several times when my husband and I are fond of riding our bikes through DC. We drive up and then ride from coffee shop
Right.
to coffee shop. And there have been a few times when we've ridden past the Supreme Court and thought, oh, we should have gone the other direction.
I
But
hear that. Now, also Carissa from your classes in DC.
yeah, I have not seen her since we graduated, even though we live like not even that far apart. I,
Well, I'm in fairly good contact with her since she lived with Carol and me for
yeah.
the last 2 years. So mind if I pass along your contact information?
Yeah, she and I've chatted a little bit via Facebook, but
Okay.
we really should try and get together at some point. The other one that I talked to quite a bit is Chelsea Summers.
Oh, really?
She was in Williamsburg for a long time. I think he's now ex-husband, was a curator at Colonial Williamsburg. And she and I had a weird parallel life because she went to Crossroads and then she lived in Texas for a while and then she lived in Oregon for a while and now she lives in Virginia and is married to a museum curator. So we had a little bit of a, huh.
Yeah. Well, again, I mean, I don't have contact information for her, so
I think I can get you that. So
that would be great. I said, yeah, the last one was the last question, but I can't let you go without one other thing because I don't know who among Crossroads alum would be better equipped to answer this. And you may not know where I'm going, but things every day we learn something new about what AI can do and
yes,
can't do.
yes.
So, I mean, is it something you think at this point is a net positive or a net negative?
Well, this morning I had a new experience with AI because I drove my husband to the train station because today's is in the office day. And on the way home, I got a text message from a friend that had a photo in it, and my phone described the photo to me for the first time ever. So instead of just
Wow.
saying sent a photo, it said sent a photo of a dog sitting in the grass. And I was a little freaked out by that, but it was very helpful because I was driving and couldn't look at the picture. Now, as an editor, I think AI is a terrible thing because it's going to make people worse writers because people aren't going to learn how to write anymore because ChatGPT can do it for them. So I maybe job security for me as an editor, but well, that remains to be seen.
You mean you don't think you'll be replaced?
Probably not, because what I do is fix all of the mistakes that people make, and AI also makes mistakes. So far, AI is just not that good. So
Rachel, this has been terrific. I love it. I'm so thankful
yeah, no, I'm
you've done
glad.
this, and I mean, you're a great interview. You've just got wonderful answers to everything.
Well, I try.